once in a while it's good for us to get holy, so we get holy right now. And I'll ask you to join me in a prayer. Good God, who created the sun which shines on us from above, who rouses the sea and makes the thunder rumble, listen. God, though hidden in a cloud, watches over us. The God of the white man calls forth crime, but our God wills good works. Our God, who is so good, commands us to vengeance. He will direct our arms and help us. Throw away the likeness of the white man's God, who has so often brought us to tears, and listen to liberty which speaks in all of our hearts. This is the prayer of Bookman on August the 14th, 1791, the night the Haitian Revolution was kicked off. Now, if your holy book can come up with a prayer like that, you know we go forward to revolution, and you know what the outcome will be. Let's get into the Holy Bible. Sisters and brothers, Professor Mackey.
Good evening. How you all doing this evening? All right. It's good to be with you again. As Brother Stedman said, I always consider myself as being at home whenever I come here. One thing I'll say about this is, of course, y'all may not find this flattering, knowing how we don't like to deal with who we are, where we come from, but Newark always reminds me of a down-home city, you know. When I come kidding up, when I come along the streets, the houses always remind me of a southern black community. And every once in a while I smell some barbecue sauce. I know it ain't too cool to eat that, but it always gives me a feeling of being home. So again, I'm glad to be with you this evening. I've been asked by African Echoes to try to do a background analysis of the geopolitical history of the Bible. I had asked Sister Haynes, and of course we're all busy, so sometimes we don't have time to do things, but what I would like you to do, if you have a program, I would ask you right next to Bible, put an S in parentheses. Because what we're going to be doing here, and I want you to always remember, we can never do it in any one lecture or any two lectures or any three lectures or any four lectures. I'm also aware of the fact that in order to have a little truth, there seems to be a little feedback coming in, Brother Yusuf. I always get an idea of how effective I am by the amount of people I disturb. If nobody gets disturbed in one of my lectures, then I figure I must have done something wrong. Because you can't be about conscious raising, all of us, without stepping on some toes. And the reason that a lot of toes get stepped on, as the brother was talking earlier, is because we've been so programmed to be naive, programmed not to think, programmed to take certain things for granted because we're afraid to look at things. The highest compliment that's ever been paid me, and I shared it with you, is by my elder mentor, John Henry Clark, and he says, if you want to find out anything, put Bill Mackey on the trail because he'll ferret it out. So he called me the ferret, and that's true. If it's out there, I'll find it. Sooner or later. It might take me a long time. But the thing, what we're saying is, we must always be prepared to change. We must be prepared to understand that the search for knowledge is an ongoing thing. and there can be no liberation without it. So what we're going to start with tonight, I've been asked to do at least 2 lectures, probably 3, to run this down for you. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you I'm God, that when I get through, you'll have the whole story. And you say, I thought y'all had the whole story, and I found out this, and you didn't tell me this. Find out whatever the hell you can. Every little bit helps. But we need to understand. You're going to finish sometime today, Brother Peter, right? This is a high-tech world, right? We did a hell of a lot better with our telephones. Because I was picking up some feedback. Okay? Yes, sir. Use the voice. All right, now, that means if we're talking about geopolitical history of the Bible, that's called an ellipsis. Dash, 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 blank, dash, 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 blank. Continue. Thank you, sir. Brother Pitzer, may we continue? Yes. Thank you, sir. Listen, a little bit of levity. The other thing, don't take this too seriously. This is one of the things that makes us different as a people, that we can laugh at ourselves. You know, gallows humor has gone a long ways to get us where we are. As a matter of fact, I feel that one of the things that we're about to lose is that ability to look at absurdity and put it in perspective like the elders used to do and keep walking. We need to bring that back again. Because if you don't have that kind of innate sense of humility, you get inundated with self-importance. And that is a direct formula for destruction. So, talking about an analysis of geopolitical history of the Bible, it means just that. We're going to look at the Bible. Because one of the things that I find about our people, and I know other people the same thing, but I'm talking about us particularly because these are the people we're concerned about. By and large, the average African knows very little about the Bibles. What we have largely is received opinion. But the first thing that we are taught is, don't question that Bible. Don't you question that, because if you question that Bible, God's going to strike you down. I learned this as a kid in the backwoods, you know, that when they said Jesus wept, you know, certain things you learn by rote. That what is the shortest verse in the Bible? Jesus wept. I ain't read that in 60 years, but it's still stuck up in there. This is how you can get to these little things. Your fears get thrown in. So they tell you, don't question. Accept it on faith. Don't look at that. And if you look at it, God's going to come and strike you down. And this thing comes to us very early in life. And there's a whole history behind this. As Brother Stedman just read, once you have accepted somebody else's, anybody else's version of your supreme being, you're in deep trouble. And the more you've accepted that, the harder it is for you to break that mold, because you really feel that God or some force will strike you down. I always say then, do you believe in God? Yes. Well, if you believe in God and God will strike you down for thinking, why did the Supreme Being give us the ability to think? It would have been much easier to perform a prefrontal lobotomy on us and just let us deal with the basics and go on. But if you have free will, then that means ability to think. So what I'm saying, so many of the concepts that we get are contradictory. I don't know how many of you have ever been or been proselytized or attempted to be proselytized by Jehovah's Witnesses. I have nothing against them personally, but I use them as what I have experienced as an extreme example of this kind of closed mindset. People will come into my home and they'll look at my library, which is extensive, and the theological section is extensive, and presume to start teaching me theology. Yes. I have to do this because let me tell you about the Bible. And I'm going to segue in, and it says, which Bible are you talking about? What do you mean, the Bible? I said, last time I counted, there was about 30 of them.
Which one are you discussing today? Oh, no, there's only one, the King James Version. I said, well, if you don't have to go to any extremists. If you know any Catholic, the Catholic will immediately dispute that, because Catholics don't use the King James Version. They use the Douay Bible. Are you aware of that? What's the Douay Bible? And I'm not kidding you. This is the mentality and the extent to our ignorance, not only about theology in general, but about the Bible in particular. Now, a lot of that comes from not being dumb. Don't get me wrong. It's not lack of intelligence. What is missing and what causes this is an abysmal ignorance of history. Because you cannot get a concept of this thing they call a Bible, not a real concept, unless you look at the history. Bibles do not grow full grown out of somebody's head. There's a whole process. There's an interlinking. Religion is not just something about beliefs. Religions are systems of power. They are means of control. They are means of eating. They are means of persuasion. When we go back long before we look at Christianity, in order to understand these Bibles and these books, we need to look at this world. And all people in the world have systems of beliefs. All people. There's no people on this earth that does not have a system of beliefs. And each system of beliefs are centered around myths. What I mean is all people have had a need. I don't claim to know why. I'm not a behavioral scientist, except what I've learned by observation. And that I was taught by a woman who never knew how to read and write, my grandma. But a very brilliant lady nevertheless. It always said to me, an ant is a small thing, but if you mash it, you'll find the guts. In other words, look to analyze something. There's always a kernel there. Don't just take something for granted. So therefore, when you look at human beings, and you see that all of these people, these groups, have some system of beliefs, the one thing that this tells us, without even going into which system of beliefs are correct and incorrect, it tells us that all human beings on this earth need psychologically, emotionally, historically, and culturally to have some means of explaining how and why they are here, how and why they get there. This is why one sees. Now, what are the first gods you see? The first things you see is the awesome forces of nature. Thunder does not play, y'all. And you don't have to go to no church to know that. Hurricanes ain't no joke. You can call them Mary, George, or what you want to. But when they move, you're in big trouble. Now, you may have a culture that says, I'm in charge, like European culture as exemplified by America. And you see the example of a Godhead. For thousands of years, the indigenous people would build tents along the bank of the Mississippi. And they always could tell by the way the wind was blowing when the hurricane was coming. So what did they do? They folded their tents and did what? Moved to high ground. What do these smart, high-tech Europeans do? They come and they build levees and docks. I'm going to defeat this river. Who the hell you think you is? I'm in charge here. And every spring, the mighty Mississippi overflows its banks. And if you're standing somewhere between April and May, you can watch these big, invincible concrete and brick buildings going floating down into the Gulf of Mexico. And after every one of these catastrophes, the experts sit down and get all their weather charts and their projections and say, why did it happen? Because it wasn't supposed to happen because we projected last time that that wasn't supposed to happen. Now, that means then that the concept of religion and its placement can be different to different people. Your lights don't seem to be doing whatever the hell it is they're supposed to do. Yeah, you try lanterns or lamps the next time. They don't give out as much light, but they're a hell of a lot more reliable. Hey, you got it. And keep the wicks trim and the chimneys clean. Newspaper make an excellent chimney lamp cleaner. But in any event, what I'm suggesting is that in order to understand the Bible as history, we must look at why religions come, where they come, and how they are used people. You cannot look at Christianity from the projection of Western European culture without getting into deep trouble. Because their whole concept of Christianity, their whole concept of the supreme being, is a belligerent one. The Westerner's God walks around hurling thunderbolts all the time. If you don't do this, he's always threatening you. God going to strike you down. He's going to do this or that and the other. All other groups have compassionate beings. They endow their God or gods with compassion. Once you set up a singular monotheistic deity, you have a big problem, because that deity don't never sleep. He or she got to do everything. They got to deal with the rain, got to deal with the sunshine, got to deal with the Vestal Virgins and all of these things. It makes a lot more sense to create a system of beliefs which allows for a chief god or goddess, as the case may be, with a whole lot of helpers. Because that way you just pick out the god or the goddess you need. You go to his or her temple. And, because now the other way, this dude is listening to somebody who wants a car, another person wants a healing, another person wants a free trip to Jamaica, another person, and this one being, you think of this, how many people are on this earth, right? Over close to 5 billion people. And you imagine, here you come up with this Western concept of this supreme being who's sitting up there just absorbing all of these contradictory wishes. One man is whispering, I wish you strike my wife down. Meantime, she's praying in the other room, kill my husband. And you got all this. So it's an irrational system. If you think about it, it is an irrational system. What then are the other reasons for this? We must look at the concept of control. Religion as control, the Bible or Bibles as vehicles of control. When we analyze these books as history and look at them within that context, we get a whole different concept of Christianity. We get a whole different concept of how it was distorted from whence it came. I find it very interesting when I look at the New Revised Version of the so-called King James Bible, and they now say that Jesus Christ was born in 10 A.D. They can't argue. Some say 5 A.D., and some say he was born in 3 A.D., and some say 10 A.D. Now, the whole concept of B.C. and A.D. was based around the birth of Jesus Christ. Am I correct? And they say anything that happened before the birth of Jesus Christ, and watch how they play the game. They count backward going the other way, and count forward coming up this way. So already you've set up a value system based on how far something is away, which already starts to work on your mind. So the logical question then, if you can't even agree on what year the dude was born, how are you going to agree on when and where the philosophy is? You keep coming up with these definite statements. When we look at the history and the periods that these things are going through, the background of how that so-called King James Version came to be King James Version, or the Douay Bible came to be Douay Bible. And you walk around that and they say, oh no, there's another group, excuse me. How many of y'all are familiar with this? The lost books of the Bible. How can they be lost? Right? Either you got a Bible, right? So you lost books of the Bible, and you look and say, well, gee, who lost them? And then it turns out, ironically, they never were lost. Yeah, the people who decided there would be a Bible was like the people who decided let there be, who said let there be light. They said, well, this here don't fit with what our power concerns are, and so therefore we'll put that over aside. This doesn't fit with this. This can fit in, maybe we'll hook that in later. But already what you're doing, you're making a political, aren't you? You're not making a spiritual decision. You're making a political decision. I don't give a damn how you feel about the decision. It is still a political decision. That being the case, we need to then understand, or try to understand, that the concept of Bibles have always been as a means of propaganda and as a means of control. You may like that or not like it. But all cultures have learned early in life, what did you do? if you want to rule, there's always from the beginning, as far back as we can go in history, there has been a connection and cooperation between the warrior and the priest. Right? The chief warrior in Western culture was known as the king, and the chief priest, as it came down, was the pope or the bishop, whoever the hell it was. But there was always a close cooperation between these two. And you see very closely. The priest's job was to get out and snow you, to threaten you with all kinds of hell's fire if you don't do this. And in case you didn't get the message, the warrior then bash your head across the head with a club. You know, if that was necessary. If that didn't get it, then they hung you or did what they wanted and dragged you to the street and you got on your knees. Once you were killed, once again the priest comes back and anoints you and gives you, ain't it interesting, you still do that. In this country, when they sentence somebody to death, they always assume that you're a Christian. And just before they pull the switch or throw the cyanide capsule or turn on the gas or whatever the method is, they send in a priest to give you something they call the last rites. The assumption, of course, is that there's no atheists in foxholes. Don't believe that. You know, well, those who believe need to believe that. I would argue that if you looked at the people that have power, they're the ones that don't believe in nothing. Let me jump ahead and give you an example in case y'all think I'm trying to fool you. I assume that you saw a picture published all over the Western world here about how long ago, November, of a young, healthy, crew-cut Marine, about 6'4" tall, loaded down to the gills with weapons, kicking a little Somalian child about 8 years old in the butt. See, he was there feeding him. And he put his foot in that little child behind so far, and it said he threw a rock at him and my patience ran thin. It was so-called Christians that sent these people there. I haven't seen one word about the hungry Somalians since the Americans started kicking ass and taking names. And every other day now, 3 or 4 more of them get killed. Because what you're looking at is the warrior ethos, which is what it is and what it always be. They're not happy unless they're killing. And any priest, any priesthood that doesn't go along with that don't serve them. That's why Mr. Billy Graham is always down there putting the blessings on the troops when they're going out to slaughter somebody. If it ain't Billy Graham, it's Cardinal, whoever the hell he is, O'Connor or whatnot. Sometimes they do a joint ecumenical thing together, and they all go out and bless the folks that's going out to do the killing. And then turn right around and tell you to remember and observe the 10 Commandments. I beg pardon? Thou shalt not kill. Now, you say, well, they have no problem with that. It affects everybody in this room. Because in order for them to kill, well, you have to become a non-human being. Right? Yes. In other words, if it's not, don't kill your own species, and you killing me, the first thing you do is dehumanize me. That's how slavery was rationalized, wasn't it? You're 3/5 of a man? Huh? Very simple. It makes things very neat. So for people like this, their God or their Bible has to be a Bible that is geopolitically compatible with their power needs, their murder needs, and to rationalize their sins. As one of my neighbors said to me, recently I went to a gathering, a teacher friend of mine, he said he was discussing with this Caucasian gentleman who was like, I guess about my age, who was a very wealthy man and was talking to his son. And they were talking about, my friend Silver said they were talking about how it was very difficult to get any kind of jobs and things for black folks and other people because they were put aside by the racism, and what was happening was not right. And this little white man, in a moment of candor, said to him, I don't understand what your problem is. You have morality on your side, and my group has the power. And the only thing that justifies my power is the fact that my dumb son does not have to pull garbage on a sanitation department truck. That's what my power does. Your morality, you being right, don't help you none. When the relationships change and you get the power, right, and I get the morality, then you can pull your child off the country. So now, I wouldn't normally tell you this, but I'm retired, and took up his attaché case and left. And that's a reality. The whole point of this is to change our perceptions of reality. The idea that the meek shall inherit the earth. Of course, as long as you don't get no mineral rights, you get no oil rights, you get no diamonds, and of course you don't even get right to plant no trees above. But you shall inherit the earth. It is better to give than to receive. The priesthood, they always tell you this, the cleric will point this out to you. Servant, obey your masters. You will get, even though you are suffering, catching hell here, y'all gonna get your reward on the other side. Nobody even poses the question, what the hell happens if there ain't no other side? Huh? Then I will have gone through hell twice. First, I will have my butt kicked for how many years I spent on earth and didn't do nothing to change it. And now I'm out here in limbo for all eternity. Now you're ready to take all them Bibles and throw them away. But when you look at these stories, and whether you like it or not, that's what they are. They are stories. The Israelis are using the Bible as an excuse for ripping off all the Palestinians and every damn Arab they can land. And how do they rationalize it? Who gave them the land? God. Yeah. We are who? His chosen people. Who said that you were his chosen people? You did. Yeah, I'm the chosen. Stand up and repeat after me. I'm chosen, I'm chosen. That gives you a license to steal and not be held accountable. That kind of rationale, of that kind of geopolitical interpretation of the Bible is precisely the rationale behind all of us being in this room. And before we could have been ripped off from our motherland, because this was done to us by people calling themselves Christians, the first thing they had to do was rationalize it, justify it. So how do you do it? First, by bad-mouthing people, by turning them into cannibals in your mind, by turning them into things and whatnot. And now when I do this to you, I am doing you a favor. But we have to also, if we look at these geopolitical concepts, we must also recognize, when we look at the history of Europe, particularly, we see that they were doing these kinds of things to themselves long before they knew where we were. The King James Version had already, by the time we get to King James, in the 17th century, they had already split off between 800 years. They had started off with one big propaganda sheet. By between 700 and 1400, they already had 5, count them, 5 different Bibles. No two of them the same. Everyone out there for a political and an economic reason. You don't believe me? I can prove to you, if we had the time, that there has been more murders, more killing done in the name of God and the Bible than in all the reasons since human beings been on this earth. And in every case, they were always doing God's work. And ain't nobody was able to sit down and say, God came down to me and told me what to do. I told you the example. I read you the example of President William McKinley talking in 1898 after the war with Spain, in which the Filipino people had fought with these bastards against Spain with the promise that once Spain was licked, that the United States would recognize Philippine independence. And of course, that turned out to be a sad April Fool joke. And when McKinley was asked, well, when are you going to give them their independence, he said, and I quote, I'm just giving you the gist of it, he says, he called a press conference and he says, gentlemen, what to do with the Philippines is a thing that has puzzled me and bothered my conscience for many a night. And I walked the floor of the White House from dusk till dawn, trying to think what to do about the Philippines. First, I realized we couldn't give it back to Spain, couldn't let Spain keep it, because that would be cowardly. Secondly, we couldn't let the French and the English and our commercial drive it happen, because that would be bad business. Third, we couldn't let them rule themselves because they were not capable of self-government. They were savages and had no religion. That's that word, right? No religion. So fourthly, that left only one thing for us to do, to take them in and Christianize them and do the best we could for them, because Christ died for them, our Savior, just like for everybody else. So then after I decided to keep the Philippines, I went to bed and I slept soundly. That's a quote. Now, as a result of his sound sleep, them people over there, as you know, had to suffer for another 70 or 80 years. Because you decided that God said we must keep the Philippines. Makes it very neat, isn't it? You don't have to worry. You don't have to be concerned about your image. You don't have to be concerned. The other concept, which comes out of the geopolitical nature of the Bible. Let's take the United States of America. You had, or what they now call the United States of America, you had exactly several attitudes that the Europeans used in order to steal this land. And the trick is to steal without being called a thief. They don't like being called thieves. That's a no-no. We are the thieves, not them. See, you steal a pocketbook, and you are a terrible thief. They steal a whole continent, 3 million square acres of land, not even counting the water. And that's called exploration and settling. It's colonial policy, bringing Christianity and civilization to these savages. So the game plan was what? First, any land not occupied by whites is vacant. Ain't that neat? Could be 50,000 indigenous people out there, but they ain't exist because they ain't white. So since it's vacant, I just bam, 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 do what I have to do to settle. The other part, of course, was that God gave us this land. Here we come again, the Bible. God gave us this land. And then, well, how do you account for the fact that the so-called Indians are here? No problem. God sent them here as caretakers. I ain't making this up. As caretakers to be custodians of this land until we came here to claim our inheritance. Now you understand why these bastards in Israel can get along so well together. See, birds of a feather flock together. Thieves are thieves. You put people under the jail for stealing a damn piece of bread. You steal a whole continent and you end up like Cecil Rhodes creating a Rhodes Scholarship. And they're still stealing it. And Cecil Rhodes was a man that swore by the Bible. People forget that Rhodes not only founded the Rhodes Scholarship, he endowed Oxford, his alma mater, counted $300 million outright with a $2 billion annuity. Rhodes died in the latter half of the 19th century. How much do y'all think that Oxford has benefited by this endowment from 1890s until 1993? Or better yet, let me turn it upside down. How much pain do you think our African brothers and sisters and deprivation have they undergone in order for all of these huge thousands of pounds of flesh to come out to make Oxford the Ivy League leader of Western so-called civilization? If that ain't a geopolitical thing about what the hell can be? Oxford has a big thing. If you go there, you see the Donaldson Cecil Rhodes. Big thing up there. Him with the, what do you call it, getting his degree and standing up there. Anybody in here got any idea of how many Africans died, and how many are still dying in the hellhole of those gold mines today? Or in the diamond mines? You must know that every diamond that comes out of Africa is controlled. And all the people who did it were folks who went in there with the Bible in one hand and the gun in the other. And when we look at the history, to put it in perspective, I would argue that my people, who I know from my experience, are compassionate people and a loving people, but I have to say it, too often we are gullible people. You know, we have this nasty habit of inviting the enemies in our house and feeding them, putting rattlesnakes to our bosom over and over and over again. And the strange part of that phenomenon is we kick the shit out of each other in a minute. Don't look at me cross-eyed, nigga. I'll kill you. Study? Not hardly. Analyze? Only if you can help me get a job. Get a job? I own the job. How the hell do you go about owning a job? I've been there 30 years. What happens when the economy sneezes? Goodbye condominium, goodbye Mercedes. Yes, sir. Well, because we never own those houses to begin with, do we? No, we only have them on loan from the banks, don't we? It's paying for on loan from the banks. And as you notice the fine print, they are renegotiable at a minute. Do you think it's an accident that churches and religious institutions are tax exempt in this country? Over all the Western world? Why is that? Why is that? Because they are part of the controlling institution. It is a question of a cabal. The power that be, the secular power, understands clearly that it needs the support, the psychological and moral support of the education system, or the formal education system, and the religious institutions. That is why we can argue all we want about not getting the proper kind of history that we need. It ain't going to change shit. If we want it, you have to do what y'all doing. Keep coming in here. You can get at me, but that's the way it is, and that's the way it's always been. When they set up this system, they set it up to serve the needs of the people with power. They don't give white folks nothing for nothing. You must know that the majority of people who go hungry, to lie down hungry every night, is white. You must know that the majority of folks on welfare in this country is Caucasian. You must know that over 80% of the narcotics addicts in this country are Caucasian. Never mind the media manipulated garbage where they always focus on some little black kid with his hand behind his back. They can't make enough money, y'all, off of us, because we ain't got it, to keep a $12 billion opium business going. The mules out here in your streets, as they call them, don't own no planes, do they? Do they have any contact with the Medellin cartel? Most of the guys that sell the garbage out here couldn't even tell you which way Colombia is. Am I right or wrong? Well, am I right or wrong? And if most of them could fly a plane, they would be looking to get jobs as airline pilots or something else. They wouldn't be hustling dope in the first place. How does it get here? You got a, what quote? A war on drugs. The man that supposedly started that war is done gone home. Bye, y'all. And he left not bombing Colombia, bombing Iraq, bombing Somalia, bombing Panama, bombing Grenada. Everywhere he went was where people are darker than European. Don't that tell y'all something? And everywhere they went, the Bible went with the gun. Mr. Billy Graham has participated over the inaugurations of about 16 presidents or administrations. Some of them been Republican, some of them been Democrat. Billy had no problem at all. Billy just shift gears and go right out there. If one guy says he wants to do a Bible, if Kennedy, hey, no problem, he should do a Bible. You want the King James Version? No sweat, here's the King James Version. You got it. And then we say, well, how can that be? We need to look at the history. How these Bibles have played their part. Let me give you just one example, and I'll be tying this in as we go through. Up until the year 1517, which I know is a little difficult for y'all to remember back that far. Most of us wasn't born then. I guess I'm the only person in this room. I was already 30 years old in 1517. I knew Martin Luther and them personally. Martin Luther, as you know, goes up to the cathedral at Worms, and he nails 95 theses to the cathedral door. Now remember, a cathedral comes out of the Latin word cathedra, head church, the leading church. And on these 95 theses, it would do well if y'all think I'm making this up. Go back and read them and see what Martin Luther, a Catholic monk, German monk, what was he accusing the church of? See, those 95 theses wasn't theses. They were 95 documented accusations of corruption and cohesion of the Catholic Church. The main thing that he accused them of was the practice of selling indulgences. You know where most of our ancestors were in 1517? Huh? We're back home in our villages. John Hawkins didn't make his first slave hunting trip to Africa until 1562. So most Europeans didn't even know which direction Africa was in 1517. But we have this monk laying out a series of charges against, now remember, there was no such thing as Catholic, Protestant, whatnot. There was only one church then. The word Catholic means, of course, universal. So he laid his charges not against Presbyterians, not against Anglicans, not against Baptists or Methodists or Episcopalians. He was talking about the church, the mother church, Rome, one church. So what he was saying when he said that that church was corrupt, what was he in effect saying? In effect, he was saying that the head Richard Christendom was corrupt because the literally Roman church ran Christendom. And he documented what was the major crime. If you had money, I'm talking about white people now. If you had money, as he stated, the church made a lot of money by selling indulgences. Now what that meant, you can't sell indulgences to poor people. Most people in Europe at that time, they had no damn shoes. So who would buy an indulgence? The people in power. So once again, the church, that is the priesthood, working in hand in glove with the secular power structure. Now what that came down to in real terms, let's suppose that you were a bishop and you went and you got some young peasant girl pregnant. That wasn't supposed to happen, so no, it's against all church canons. No problem. You went to the next highest person, the archbishop, and you said, listen, I got this little wench pregnant. I ain't even supposed to be sleeping with nobody. After all, I took an oath of celibacy, but hey, you know how those things are. You know, I was standing up one day and she tempted me. The devil made me do it. And now her belly is sticking out. How much was an indulgence cost me? Well, depends. Well, if indulgence that, well, is she anybody's daughter of consequence? No, she's just a peasant. All right, tell you what you do. Give me $100 for my personal defraying of expenditure to get this thing squared away from you. When you go by the cathedral, put another $100 there. I might need $50 more for the cardinal in case he should ask any questions. And is the girl literate? No, she's dumb. In that case, I will bring the father in and tell them that his daughter has been found, made pregnant by persons unknown, and who knows, she may be about to have a second immaculate conception. End of case. Martin Luther said, how can you stand up in your pulpit on Sunday and preach this and do this? And he named some names. That was the beginning of what we know today as Protestantism, the concept of protesting. He walked out of the church. Did we corrupt the church? According to them folks, we are the people that are biologically prone toward corruption. We are biologically prone toward crimes. We know that priests had babies, fathered babies, owned nuns, and buried them in the place. This ain't no rumor. This has been documented. Just because you put on a long frock and take an oath of celibacy, it's like me saying, yeah, my grandma said, boy, I don't want to catch you looking at that girl. No, Grandma. And as soon as I got around the corner, is you looking up that girl out there? No, ma'am, not me. I ain't seen nothing. Reminds me of the story of the preacher and the preacher. Well, one of our preachers is preaching. And there was a woman sitting over there, and her dress was way up, beautiful legs, built like only Mosetta's can be built. And the deacon was over there, and all the deacons was sitting, and they all was focused in on that lady's legs. And nobody was paying Reb no attention. And Reb was preaching his hellfire sermon, fire and brimstone, and nothing was happening. All eyes was glued over there. Fool the regular congregation looking at them legs. So finally Reb turned to the deacon, amen corner, and he says, verily, verily, I say unto you, all you that look under that lady's dress shall go blind. And one deacon said, that may be, but damn if I ain't going to risk this one eye. In other words, when reality runs against theology, theology runs. So the rulers have learned this a long time ago. Now, what Martin Luther put in, when you look at, when you go back even before then, from the beginning of its inception of Christianity, they had a problem. History tells us that for the first 100 years of Christianity, whether you want to take AD 2, 5, or 10, pick one, for about the first 100 and some years, the faithful got along very well without any Bible at all. All right, no Bible. It was an oral tradition carried down, much like our traditions are in countries, carried down tradition. Therefore, what was said, what the faithful said, they got directly from the priest, or the preacher, as we would call him. And the whole dude that set up this method was a very shrewd gentleman by the name of Simon called Peter, the fisherman. You know, the dude that told Christ, I'll be with you through thick and thin. And when it got too thick, Peter thinned out quick. They said, didn't I see you with that man? Not me, man. I'm a fisherman. No, you must talk about my brother. I ain't know that dude. But I saw you with him, man. No, you ain't seen me nowhere. But then after Christ got done in, Peter had some second thoughts. Well, he was still alive to have some second thoughts. And as we know, it was Peter. It was Peter and Paul. Paul, of course, was the propagandist, the converted Jewish gentleman who started out kicking ass and taking name. And on the road to Damascus, as the myth goes, bam, the thunder came out of some form, and Paul had a vision. I think what he had, he was scared shitless. And he suffered and underwent instant conversion. And he said, Lord, tell me, what did you want me to do, man? Because them thunderbolts is dangerous up yonder, so I ain't, And, of course, he became out and then went ahead and did what his thing, created a whole thing among the Gentiles, etc., etc. But then Peter, of course, became the propagandist, the guy that set up the church. He was the guy that was what we would call today an administrative genius. he set up the structure. And then the structure and the propaganda and the myths about the resurrections, etc., etc. Now, those people who teach us theology, and again, I don't care what y'all believe, so don't go and say I'm trying to unconvert you. My thing is history. But you can't study history without knowing something about theology. When you looked at what they were doing, it became obvious that if you're going to control something, you got to have something to put the hellfire people in. We know that in the early days of Christianity, just before Constantine in the 4th century turned Christian, that it was very difficult to get people to change to Christianity, not because they didn't want to believe, because people by and large believe anything, don't we? Whatever is the going thing. You get up in the morning, right? You don't believe that? I bet most of y'all tomorrow morning, if you're going to work, the first thing you do, you turn on the weather report, and the white folks tell you the lies of the day. Now we have this thing over the blip over here and whatnot, and if the dude tells you it's going to be snowing, you run for your rubbers, or your rain, you run for your umbrella, and they can tell that lie for days and days. The only damn weather they can predict is the weather that's happening right now, just like you or I can predict, right? But this is what it is, and no matter how many times they tell us that lie, the next time we're right back there, I got to hear this. It ain't nothing about weather. It's about entertainment. It's not about news. It's about entertainment. They're selling you a product. And you hear this guy sitting up there, and they are entertainers, and you watch it. They tell you George Jones weather. Dig that. George Jones weather. Mary Smith's weather. Yeah, they own the weather. yeah. George Jones's weather. And then George Jones comes in and tells you, accurate weather. Because whatever I tell you is right. And we believe that. We are programmed to believe that. And when them hurricanes come up from nowhere like it did here a couple of months ago, and the dude said, I ain't know where it come from. It wasn't on the blip screen when I went to bed last night. And it almost washed all the 5 boroughs of New York off the map. Still cleaning up that mess over there. Does it change? No. If you worked on your job with that kind of incompetence, you'd have forgot you ever had the job. They would not tolerate that kind of incompetence. So when you look at the way that these things get turned up and how the mind is moved in, and you see that when you look at Christianity and you look at these Bibles, you see clearly that there's a connection between the propagandists like Paul, the administrative geniuses like Peter, and now when you decide to do that, then you have to go back and do several things, don't you? You got to clean up the act. If you need to have somebody walking on water, then you create somebody walking on water. No problem. Particularly 100 years later, who the hell remembers? You know? If you need a miracle with one slice of bread and a quarter of a fish, you get that miracle. Right? You get it. A little bit of sleight of hand, daring do, and whatnot. And once you got some people who get up and say, I seen it. Who's going to argue? And if you got some power, because most human beings, and hear me well, right now, anytime, people don't change that much. Most human beings do what they think will get over with them. If you know who is the power that be, and he says to you, George, I'm the greatest thing in the world. Yes, sir. You know, isn't my wife beautiful? You know she looks like a dog. Sir, this is the most beautiful lady that ever seen. I would show love for that to be my woman if she were not yourn. Right? Now, it worked exactly the same way. The problem that the early Christians saw about getting converts, because the pagans, you must understand this, the pagans were very well happy, content with their system. They had a system of belief. You don't believe me? Let me tell you what they gave you. They gave you Easter. Oh yeah, that goes back thousands of years before Christianity. They gave you Christmas. They gave you the whole concept of the Immaculate Conception. Go back to the motherland. Go back to Egypt. You must know the story of Isis, Osiris, and Heth, right? And of course the loss of the penis, which of course is the fruition, because what we're talking about, the phallic symbol, which has nothing to do, it has to do with life projection. And we know that what had happened when Isis, the son's penis, he was chopped up by Seth the god and thrown into the river Nile. And Isis went and gathered up piece by piece the body of her son and reconstructed it, all except one part, which was what? The phallus. And why? Here comes that fish again. Remember the fish? The fish had eaten it. So now you come up with not only a concept of resurrection, but you come up with a concept of immaculate conception, all tied into one. Also, the whole concept of male-female cohesiveness, because all of these gods carried the characteristics, the hormones of both sexes, which again comes out of ancient religions. The concept of hermaphroditism, the conjoining of the sexes. It's a tradition that goes way back, because all religion fundamentally not only must deal with the concept of how and when we got here, but the concept of procreation, because each group wants to be assured that there will be life after you have moved on. Different cultures expressed it differently. But the main difference between Western European society and all the other societies was Western Europe, when they came out of those caves for whatever reason, was never able to inculcate a humanistic component within their religious concepts. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Just think of your own experiences. I will kill you now and then go pray at the altar. I didn't make it. It happened. This is what it is. Now, so what do? You've coming with these new gods. The only way you're going to make people accept them new gods is you're going to do it by force, or you're going to do it by chicanery, or you got to come with some kind of snow job on them, because they're perfectly happy. Let me give you an example. We know that most people in the Western world, up until the 4th century, the reign of Constantine, were pagans. The Christians, as you know, were catching hell. But Constantine the Great decided, for political reasons, to become converted to Christianity, because he realized that was the only way he could hold what was left of the Roman Empire together. That's why he moved it from Rome to Byzantium. But the whole thing was falling apart. And what caused it? As the same thing was going to happen 1,200 years later, when Martin Luther went out and saw the whole corruption of the system. Now, once the emperor passes a decree and says, starting at 6 a.m., Monday morning tomorrow, this is a Christian empire, where does that leave all you pagans? Huh? Is your belief going to change between now and 6 tomorrow morning? When you get up tomorrow morning, you're going to believe exactly the same thing you believed when you went to bed tonight. Yes or no? But you're also a survivor, and you're a pragmatist. And the word has come down from the palace that as of now, every damn body by 9 o'clock better have a cross around their neck. There are damn few martyrs in this world, y'all. Yeah? If you had a business of making crosses, you could have become a millionaire within 6 hours. Take me to your cross. Show me how to say them Hail Marys full of grace, bullfrog pissed in the monkey's face. But you be there. You get that cross. Because that cross now becomes your open sesame. We have the same symbology here today, whether it be a car, whether it be a suit or whatnot. The language, the body language tells us something. Now then, the people who went to bed pagans the night before, they wake up and they are now Christians on paper, right? They now must find some church to go to. And what's the first thing they did? They just took the pagan temples and converted them to church. Took a temple, had a temple to the goddess Venus, And you came by the next morning, there was a picture of Christ hanging up on the cross. Y'all think it's funny. You think about that symbol.